The Career Development Stakeholders Conference is a conference targeted at cultivating collaboration, partnership, and knowledge sharing between stakeholders in the private and public career development services sectors by discussing career management as a strategy to increase employability of the youth and thereby sustaining livelihoods. The key concepts of this year's conference are knowledge mobilization, career development learning, career management, and sustainable livelihoods. These concepts will address getting the right information to the right people and in the right format to facilitate decision making, developing learners' ability to make sense of and synthesize knowledge for effective decision making related to career choices, professional development, and career building activity, career exploration, development of career goals, and the use of career strategies to obtain career goals. And of course, the skills, assets, both material and social, and approaches to be used by individuals and communities in order to survive. The conference is divided into two phases: the webinar themed Career Services and COVID-19 Realities for South Africa, which will take place on the 22nd, 27th, and 29th of October 2020, and the online conference, which will take place on the 19th and 20th of November 2020, themed Career Learning and Management for Sustainable Livelihoods. The contents of the webinar include Session 1, which addresses implications of the COVID-19 pandemic on delivering career services, with a focus on schooling and post-school education and training sectors. Session 2, including an Estonia case study, which addresses online career services as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, Session 3, which addresses realities for public education and training and the youth of South Africa, with a focus on the digital divide. The contents of the online conference include Sub-Theme 1, addressing mobilizing knowledge for career learning and career management, Sub-Theme 2, addressing partnerships for sustainable livelihoods. This part of the conference will accommodate employers, students, leadership representatives, unemployed youth, youth leadership representatives, professional bodies, career development practitioners, post-school education, training and development providers, private education and training institutions, government departments, and trade unions federations. The conference keynote speakers are a combination of international and local speakers with a rich range of knowledge and experience. The speakers will be from various national South African government departments, the private sector, and from some benchmark countries who have embraced technology and its influence on careers. This year's conference leads off from the theme of the previous conference as well as the recommendations thereof, which state that career information must be contextualized and aimed at addressing systemic issues of unemployment and employability. Technology must be used to maximize access to information for citizens with disabilities. Awareness of careers in the changing world has to be created. And a multimodal approach to career development services must be adopted and integrated into the curriculum. So join us in this year's conference. Save the dates and ensure you do not miss out on an opportunity to help shape the future of careers in South Africa.
It is a world of great promise and hope. It is also a world of despair, disease and hunger. Nelson Mandela. MERSETA is spearheading a career development project with UNISA, ETDP, CETA, UP and SACTA, aiming to further professionalize the field of career development in South Africa. This project has developed a state-of-the-art system to register career development practitioners and support their continued professional development. It has also established the African Journal of Career Development, facilitating the reporting of research around promoting sustainable, decent work. A biennial National Congress for Career Practitioners has been hosted to enable practitioners to come together to reflect on victories and address challenges in the field. It has empowered a feasibility study into homegrown career management interventions for youth and adults in the manufacturing, engineering, and related sectors. Finally, this project has enabled SACTA to represent South Africa in the International Career Development Peak Bodies Network, formed to share resources between countries and provide a collective voice for the field. This project is of great national importance towards ensuring decent and meaningful work for all who are willing and able. We would like to thank our members, partners and stakeholders for making this leap possible.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a special warm welcome to all our esteemed guests. My name is Ernest Munna Khotlarangaka, and welcome to this very first webinar, which will be a three-part series that forms the first phase of this year's Career Development Stakeholders Conference. The format of these webinars will be presentations by speakers, followed by a Q&A session at the end. We do encourage audience participation through our chat feature, where you can post any comments or questions you may have, and we will have our speakers answer and address them during the Q&A session. As most of you will know, this conference usually happens in person, and there would have been a series of career development forum meetings preceding the conference. It is for this reason that the DHET saw it fit that they host these webinars to allow stakeholders to engage on how we can continue to deliver career services during the COVID-19 pandemic. It would be amiss for me not to acknowledge the MERSETA, who are not only sponsors, but active partners of the CDS and this conference. Under this year's theme, Career Services and COVID-19, Realities for South Africa, the first phase will center on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on career services in South Africa. Particular focus on the impact on youth as one of the groups most negatively impacted by the pandemic, given interruptions to education and training and increased levels of unemployment with the looming economic recession. Access to career development services, given pre-existing barriers, coupled with the added obstacles as a result of the measures taken to curb the impact of the pandemic will be explored with a case study presented by the Estonia Public Employment Services. A focus on the digital divide, looking at the response of both private and the public sector, and a presentation of how countries like Brazil and Vietnam have managed the digital divide will additionally be explored. As mentioned before, there will be 3 webinars in this series, and the proposed sub-themes for the respective sessions will be as follows. Today's session will be looking at schooling and the post-schooling education and training sectors, specifically the implications of the COVID-19 pandemic on delivering career services. The second session will be looking at online career services as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and attention will be given to the Estonia case study. Then the final and third session will be the digital divide, looking at the realities for public education and training and the youth of South Africa. Today, we will have a wonderful panel of speakers who include Mr. B. Manamela, the Deputy Minister of the DHET. We will then have Mr. G.F. Konde, the DG of the DHET, who will be represented by Mr. ZMC Mvalo, the DDG of Skills Development Branch in the DHET. After that, we'll have Dr. MJ Maboya, the DDG of Curriculum Policy Support and Monitoring in the DBE. Then we shall have Ms. G. Tiroyabona, the Assistant Director in Advising, Access and Success Center for Teaching and Learning at the University of the Free State. Lastly, we'll have Mr. Al Mukeki, the Director of the Career Development Services at the DHET. Now, our first speaker is going to be Mr. B. Manamela. The Deputy Minister would have loved to engage with this webinar live, but due to the limitation of busy schedules, he is unable to. Fortunately, technology allows him to still deliver his message through a recording. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Manamela to welcome us to this webinar.
Ladies and gentlemen, good day. It gives me a great pleasure to host and welcome you at this career development webinar. Let me introduce you to the theme for this webinar, which is entitled Career Services and COVID-19 Realities for South Africa. This webinar occurs under a period that none of us had anticipated. The COVID-19 pandemic has created a disruption of untold proportions. It goes without saying that the pandemic has ruthlessly interrupted how we work. The wave may have subsided, but the reality is that a lot has changed and shall remain as such. We find ourselves forced by the prevailing circumstances to reflect by means of platforms such as these. Due to the interdependence of our work, we are forced to share thoughts, experiences, and best practice as we collectively navigate these unprecedented times. We are hosting this webinar for this purpose, to reflect, to gather lessons from what is working, to explore and exploit possible partnerships, and through discourse, to create possible avenues through which career services can be offered amidst the realities of the pandemic. As a result of this pandemic, our training and education system is confronted with an inescapable transformation. The world of work has not been spared. The pandemic is changing how work is carried out in almost all the sectors of our economy. The provision of career services facilitates a smooth transition and mobility into and between institutions of learning, training, and the world of work. The OECD Career Guidance and Public Policy details a number of benefits linked to the provision of career services. Career services ensure that young people get access to a variety of careers, information on learning, financial aid, training, and employment opportunities. Effective career guidance helps the youth in choosing suitable careers that lead to employment opportunities, and it is also linked to the reduction in dropout rates. With this in mind, it is important to note that COVID-19 pandemic has certainly interrupted our conventional approaches to the provision of career services. The question that we need to grapple with is, how can we continue offering career services during the COVID-19? Ladies and gentlemen, inevitable change is upon us. It has become common knowledge that we are relocating into the e-world, the world in which some services are digitized. Digitization of services is increasingly becoming a new norm as technology continues to advance. Digitized services ensure easy and expanded access. When services are digitized, there is less travel cost, physical movement, and geographical constraints. Through this webinar, we need to invest our time ruminating and deliberating on how we can further digitize the provision of our career services and ensure access to these online services, bearing in mind our contextual realities. One of the uncomfortable realities faced by many of our young people is the cost of data. The high cost of data and lack of appropriate infrastructure creates what has been termed the digital divide. The digital divide brings under the spotlight the plight of the have-nots and thereby creates an unintended exclusion from access to essential services such as career guidance. Although our government, through the Ministry of Communications and Digital Technologies, is investing time and resources to address the challenge of ITC infrastructure and the reduction of data costs, that said, the road ahead of us is still riddled with challenges. Greater collaboration between us as government and the private sector will play a significant role in ensuring that career services are offered amidst the realities of the COVID-19 pandemic. Collaborative efforts ensure that available resources can be utilized optimally. COVID-19 has put under the spotlight the notion that the world has become a village. It has highlighted that partnerships between and among stakeholders, private and public, is a necessity and difficult to do without. Working in silos is a thing of the past. Moderator, let me conclude by saying career development is a much needed intervention, especially during these trying times. Our youth and the working class need access to career development services to navigate the education and training system and the labor market. Let me also take this time to officially welcome all our speakers. I hope that the expertise that we are bringing into this webinar will result in applicable lesson. Welcome everyone to this webinar, which is now officially opened, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, for your warm welcome and overview of career services. You have highlighted the all-important question of the day of how do we continue to deliver career services during this disruption of the pandemic. Our panel of speakers will speak to this question from the perspective of their respective sectors. Coming up next, we've got a message from Mr. G.F. Konde, the DG of the DHET. Due to unforeseen circumstances, he is not available to join us, but he has given us worthy representation by Mr. ZNC Mvalo, the DDG of Skills Development Branch in the DHET. He will be looking at the implications of the COVID-19 pandemic on delivering career services in the post-school education and training sector. Remember to post your questions and comments about his talk in the chat for him to respond to later. Over to you, Mr. Mvalo. Please remember to activate your video and unmute your audio. While we wait for Mr. Mvalo to connect with us, I will go through some of the comments we've got here. We've got Judith Smith saying thank you for the welcoming address. We've got Kani saying looking forward to this engagement. I just want to check with the technical team. Do we have Mr. Mvalo with us on the call? While we wait for him to reconnect, I really would love to echo the sentiments of the Deputy Minister. One of the things that really stood out for me in his talk is really talking about how we need to come together in this time. He mentioned a great, powerful thing, saying the fact that the world has now become a village. And we all know the very important and age-old saying of if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, we need to go together. And I think it is so important right now for all the stakeholders in the private, in the public sector, and every single citizen of South Africa at this moment to be able to come and say, listen, let us come together, let us put our hands and let us get our hands dirty, because we really need to get our country over this hump. We need to get ourselves into a place where career services can be available to everyone, doesn't matter what background they come from and irrespective of their particular challenges that they might be facing. Okay. If we are struggling to connect with Mr. Mvalo, I would love to see if by any chance our next speaker, Dr. Maboya, might be available. Dr. Maboya is the DDG of Curriculum Policy Support and Monitoring at the DBE. She will be looking at the implications of the COVID-19 pandemic on delivering career services in the schooling sector. Remember to post your questions and comments about her talk in the chat for her to respond to. Dr. Maboya, if you're with us, could you please put your video and audio on right now? There we go. Fantastic. We've got Dr. Maboya on and we can see her. Dr. Maboya, can you get your audio connected? To our guests, I must apologize for our technical glitches. I'm sure we are all very aware that this year of 2020 and the pandemic has really forced upon us a very steep learning curve, and it's really accelerated our adoption of these technological platforms. But I think we can all agree that by the end of this year, we'll all be experts in this field, and we'll be able to transition and interact seamlessly with all of these particular technologies. Dr. Maboya, I see we see you there, and your presentation is up. If you can just put your audio on, Dr. Maboya, I will hand over to you right now. Apologies, Dr. Maboya. Your audio is still muted. If you can just put your audio on before you continue with your presentation. We still cannot hear you. The blue button at the top of your screen with the mic icon.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much, Doctor. I'm going to hand over to you for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but the presentation that is flighted there is not the one from DBE. Please flight the correct one. Yes.
Apologies for that, Dr. Maboya. The slide presentation from the DBE is loading. If we just give it a few seconds to come up on your side, and then you can just give me confirmation once you see it on your side. There we go. Dr. Maboya, as soon as you are ready, I will hand over to you. The presentation is live.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. The presentation is on. And thank you very much for the opportunity that you have afforded us to come and share our ideas in this webinar. Well, on the screen there, you can see the presentation outline. I'm not going to go through that because the outline is in terms of the questions that we were requested to respond to. Then the next slide, go to the other slide. It's on the introduction. Just by way of introduction, we are highlighting the importance of career development services, and in doing so, we are locating it within the broader HRD strategy of the Republic of South Africa. But we are also highlighting the key objectives or outcomes of any education system, which is to equip learners with knowledge, skills, and values for self-fulfillment and active participation and contribution to the socio-economic growth of our country. And we also highlighting the fact that it is critical for learners as early as possible to be exposed to these career development services so that they can ultimately articulate smoothly from the schooling system into higher education and into the world of work. Can you go to slide number 3? In slide number 3, this is where we are reflecting on the impact of COVID-19 on basic education. And colleagues, there's no doubt that the pandemic has had both positive and negative effects on education in general. And on this slide, we are showing, we're starting with the positive effects. In this slide, bullet number 1, we are highlighting the fact that we have seen an increase in public awareness of the importance of in-class learning. Because as a system, we strongly believe that our strength is in the classroom. And I think the pandemic has really been able to heighten that. We have also seen an increased awareness of the need for blended teaching and learning using multimedia platforms, be they digital, terrestrial, broadcast, and in contact, type of platforms. With the limited time that we had to finish the curriculum, the pandemic has been able actually to expose us, to expose the inefficiencies in the schooling curriculum. It showed us, it actually reminded us that the curriculum is overloaded in terms of content. And as a result, it created the need for us to reorganize the curriculum and to trim it in order to promote deeper learning. And there is also a whole of society approach that we have seen really playing out during this period, where parents, where communities were working together in trying to address some of the challenges that confronted us. The last bullet there is about, the positives in terms of home learning as well as self-directed learning, which are critical elements of lifelong learning. So out of this pandemic, there are those positives that have been realized, and as a system, we'll have to see how we heighten them such that we are able to move forward. The next slide depicts the negative effect of the pandemic. There's a picture where we are showing at the center that the major contributor was the disruption of schooling. And as a result of the disruption of schooling, we experienced loss of teaching time. We experienced limited contact in respect of teaching and learning. We also experienced teachers and learners with comorbidities whom we had to accommodate. We had to come up with guidelines to guide on how teachers who are teaching from home can navigate that space. We also had to develop guidelines to support learners who are learning from home. But also importantly, the inequalities that were illuminated by the pandemic also showed that there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of, ICTs, in terms of the capacity of senior management teams at school level to be able to really manage this unprecedented context that we find ourselves in, and also in terms of basic services I mean, we were so exposed that we noticed that there are a lot of schools that still do not have running water, that do not have sanitation, and so on. And that had a huge impact on, the environment that we found ourselves in terms of safety and issues of, hygiene. We were also exposed in terms of infrastructure limitations because of social distancing requirements. As you would know, we even had to make it a point that we resort to rotational timetables because our classrooms could not, take the usual number of learners in the classroom. So as a result, we really found ourselves in that situation. Psychological challenges that were brought about by the trauma, anxiety, and uncertainties that teachers, learners, and parents went through. So these are some of the negative impact that we had. And on top of this structure, we do have, how we measures that we put in place in response to this the negative impact that we have just highlighted. For instance, we were forced to find innovative ways of dealing with the situation, such that, resorting to e-learning and also making it a point that we rely on research to inform whatever measures that we put in place. And we are also forced to strengthen our stakeholder collaboration. I mean, during that time only, we managed to meet with a whole lot of stakeholders just to make sure that everybody is on board. And I'm not going to go through all of them. The next slide speaks to the implications of COVID-19 on access to career development services for learners. When you look at the bottom, I started with limited access to curriculum, and due to prolonged and intermittent closing of schools, this made learners to have limited access to curriculum, including the curriculum for life orientation and life skills, in which career development is mainly embedded. This was further compounded by the fact that we had to trim the curriculum and also had to resort to rotational timetables, meaning that the teaching time was further limited. Colleagues, the issue of social distancing and lockdown regulations made it almost impossible to access these services through co-curricular activities, such as your career expos, your open days, your visits to workplaces. It really became almost impossible. And another issue is the transition from the schooling to PSET institutions and the world of work. And the transition was also disrupted as a result of the inadequate preparation of grade 11 and grade 12 learners to make informed choices about their future. Progression into PSET and productivity in the labor market was also compromised due to high projected retention and dropout rates. Reports that we are getting from provinces do indicate that, of course, we will be experiencing, high retention rates as well as high dropout rates for the first time in the schooling system. Access to can be promoted through online resources. This is what we are saying, that digital learning platforms, virtual career expos, and open days, which of course currently are accessible to a few privileged learners. But we are saying that with strong partnerships with other departments, with other government entities, with donor agencies and civil society organizations, I'm sure we can be able to really reach out to these learners who are in those areas that do not have the necessary technological infrastructure. Obstacles for these services due to the pandemic threats. We have highlighted there that due to COVID-19, we experienced the issue of the number of teachers and learners with comorbidities who had to be home instead of being at school. We also experienced inadequate instructional teaching time, as I indicated. There was also a lot of uncertainty about the future prospects, and definitely this has had a negative impact on our learners who are supposed to be exiting the schooling system, including those who will remain in the schooling system. Lack of technological infrastructure, as I indicated, it also became an impediment for us to be able to leverage on digital platforms. Limited exposure to these services, especially your core curricular activities that I alluded to earlier on. The trimming of content to focus on the core fundamentals also really somehow became an obstacle. Can we go to the next slide? As I indicated, focus and emphasis on core content coverage was an impediment. Limitation to remote learning relating to access, social exclusion, and perpetuating injustices of the past, thus leaving the poor and underprivileged behind. And we have seen also widened digital divide, and that creating a gap in education quality and socio-economic equality. The next slide, colleagues, is on opportunities for South Africa in response to the pandemic. I'm starting with the first one on top of the bulb. And we are saying that the context in which we are, difficult as it may, presents us with an opportune time to rethink and review our career development services policies in the basic education sector. But it also implores us to use innovative delivery modes. For example, visual platforms that we can use. We can also use simulations as approaches to strengthen access to these services. And due to job losses and high rate of unemployment, which have been engendered by COVID-19, we need also to strengthen or to accelerate the initiative that has been that is currently being implemented by the Department of Basic Education on the 3-stream model, so that we also strengthen our vocationally oriented programs to try to address the skills mismatch that we find in the labor market. of course, in support of the decade of the artisan. And in as far as the curriculum is concerned, we are saying that going forward, we want to take the opportunity of ensuring that every teacher becomes a career development ambassador, and which gives us the opportunity to move towards careers across the curriculum approach in order to provide a coherent and meaningful career development services for all. And we also want to leverage on collaboration and partnerships in terms of existing programs. For instance, we do have an existing program within the DBE, which we call EQT, which is Education, Employability, and Entrepreneurship. So we also want to leverage on that, and also to use other existing structures such as your QLTCs to support and sustain career development services, and to make them as much accessible as possible. In the next slides, colleagues, I'm just showing pictures of some of the things that I've spoken to. For instance, the slide that is flighted there is more about, how we can begin to use online platforms to enable learners to access education, including to access your career development services. The next one is also about, coding and robotics, how we can begin to use artificial intelligence, how we can begin to use, computational thinking and so on. I was even saying that during COVID-19, especially when we were still under lockdown 4 and 5, we could have actually made use of artificial intelligence to drop off some of our printed materials to libraries and to our learner homes and so on, and using your piloted drones to do that. The last photo there, photograph there is more about partnerships and how we can begin to strengthen collaboration and partnerships, even in terms of delivering on career development services. Can you go to the next slide? Then the next slide is on, can you just go to the next one? Existing threats for career development services delivery during pandemic. And this will be mostly a repetition of what we have already spoken to. We spoke about the content which was compromised due to the reduction in the teaching and learning time, and the fact that we had to resort to rotational timetables where learners are not going to school on a daily basis. And inadequate preparation of grade 11 learners for higher education and the world of work, we've already indicated that. Insufficient support for our grade 11 learners to make informed subject choices, social distancing and lockdown regulations, disrupted core curricular approaches to career development services delivery. Teachers and learners with comorbidities might be left behind, and therefore, creating a lot of learning losses. Lack of sufficient psychosocial support services is also an issue, and limited access to these resources due to lack of technological infrastructure. The last but one slide share is on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the country as a whole. We know, for example, that we have experienced job losses due to the pandemic, and that has led to, the triple oppression of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. And we have also experienced a severe contraction of the economy, but we have also seen new types of jobs emerging from COVID-19. And we have seen the new normal in terms of remote working and lockdown regulations, and possible increase in school dropout rates. I wanted to mention this. And also an upsurge in social ills such as your gender-based violence, crime, as well as corruption. In conclusion, Jay, I just want to reiterate that career development is therefore not only a private good of value to individuals, it is also a public good of value to society and the country. And therefore, we need to make sure that we continue to provide these services despite these challenging conditions that we find ourselves in. COVID-19 pandemic has created a greater emphasis and awareness of the importance of a comprehensive career development services program. And as we know, the implications of the pandemic on the world economy and the new normal has created the opportunity for new and emerging careers to arise sooner than later. Chairperson, I have come to the end of my presentation, and once more, let me thank you for indulging me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maboya. We really appreciate you taking us behind the curtain of the challenges that are being faced by the DBE. And I think, the comments already are showing us people with great questions, some with great comments that I think we will go into a little bit later. But looking at our next speaker, again, we were going to have Mr. Gia Konde, the DG of the DHET, but who is unfortunately unable to join us. We've got Mr. ZMC Mvalo, the DDG of the Skills Development Branch of the DHET, who is here with us and is ready and available. As a reminder, he'll be looking at the implications of COVID-19 on delivering career services in the post-schooling education and training sector. Please, sir, remember that you need to put your video on and unmute your mic. And to the audience, remember that you need to post questions and comments about his talk, and then he will respond to them later. Mr. Mvalo, are you with us?
Yes, Program Director, I'm back.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to you right now.
Thanks very much, Program Director, fellow panelists, colleagues, participants. Once again, I must appreciate this opportunity that we are having as the department to make this presentation to this august audience. The topic, Program Director, as you have already alluded to, is post-school education and training implications of the COVID-19 pandemic on delivering career services. And then we'll see here, these are the areas that I'll be covering: post-school vision and mission, 5-year strategic outcomes, what we aim to achieve, the role played by career development services, career services, 2018 conference, current provision of career services, COVID-19 challenges, recommendations, and then I will conclude thereof. You will see the vision and the mission of the Department of Post-School Education and Training is quite very central in the rendering of career development services across the country. Our vision is an integrated and coordinated PSET system for improved economic participation and social development of youth and adults. Whilst the mission seeks to provide strategic leadership to the PSET system through development of an appropriate steering mechanisms, including but not limited to career development services mechanisms. Effective oversight, monitoring and evaluation, provision of support services in relation to teaching and learning, funding of PSET institutions and entities. These are our 5-year strategic plan outcomes, colleagues, which will get them as well in our 5-year strategic plan as the Department of Higher Education and Training. Expanded access to PSET opportunities, that's the area you'd agree with me that is haunting us, because we need to expand these PSET opportunities so that we can enroll as many as possible young people, whether in our TVET colleges, universities, as well as our CET colleges. Improved efficiency and success of the PSET system, improved quality of PSET provision, a responsive PSET system, excellent business operations within the department. This is the impact that we seek to achieve, because for all your interventions, you must aim to have impact. You must aim to change something. You'll see the red one in your far right, access to PSET opportunities, the one that I've already alluded to. And then the impact there, my colleague as well, Dr. Mwe, has spoken with regards to this impact, improved social and economic development through the PSET system, which is quite very critical for all our interventions. Education and training needs of individuals, employers, and society are addressed. You'll see here, we're just trying to have some narration of the role that is being played by career development services. Dr. Mboya went at length with regards to this as well. You'll see we have schooling, and then we have post-school, we've got world of work. There is a nexus if you look into the work of career development services, as it must be felt in each and every area. Whether it's schooling, it's post-schooling, it's world of work. So I think we know already the implications and the impact that has been caused by COVID-19 pandemic in our society and almost everywhere, with a high rate of youth unemployment standing now at 52%. If you look into those young people between the ages of 15 and 24. Another important area, of course, is those who are not in employment, education, and or training. That number for young people between the ages of 15 and 24 is standing between 3.5 million. And then those between 25 to 34 is standing at 4.6 million. If you just bring those together, then it will give us about 8 million. So these are the areas, especially, as the post-school education and training, we must make impact, in terms of our career development services. As I've mentioned earlier on, career services to us as the department and the post-school education and training sector, as central, of course, it will be study options. I know during our time, in particular, during my time, I never heard of anything related to career development services. I went to university without being informed as to which option or options that I can really explore myself. So we would not wish to see the generation of today also to face, same or similar situation. So that is the area we're focusing, and we continue to focus and embed it in all our policies, procedures, and systems as the Department of Higher Education and Training and general our post-school education and training sector. Financial aid, we know, is also a very big issue, especially when you start the calendar year. You know, colleagues will know we've got like your NSFAS and other institutions that are playing a very pivotal role with regard to financial aid. And obviously, if you know we are not rendering these career services, those young people, especially in your rural areas, they are not going to know of all these available opportunities that are out there. Skills in demand, you know, I always raise the issue whenever someone is going to make his or her own choice to say, let's also look as to what is required by the economy. And we know, for example, the president has just addressed the parliament yesterday dealing with the economic restructuring and recovery plan. If you look into that plan, it's unleashing some of the areas of the economy that government will be investing in going forward, especially if you look into your infrastructure development. So this is quite very critical service that we do render as the Department of Higher Education and Training Career Services. Transition into the labor market is forever always important for all of us, you know, as the country. It's a societal challenge. So that is why you'll see, if you look into our career services, it's one of those areas that we place some prime interest in it. Entrepreneur development also quite very important, because we know the economy of this country, you know, even if you look into the numbers of those who are employed in the main, you'll see that those who are employed in the formal employment are less compared to those employed in the formal employment. Therefore, it becomes quite very critical to us, you know, to raise awareness around what are those entrepreneurial opportunities that are out there, and encouraging young people in particular to also venture into these areas. Obviously, the next one there is your access to post-school education and training. So it's an area that remains forever important to all of us, and as the country in particular. Then if we just go through a memory lane, we look into our 2018 conference. In our 2018 conference, which the department hosted, it was under the theme Careers in a Changing World. My colleague, Dr. Mboya, has really, you know, introduced some very important areas when you look into, especially the careers, you know, the future of work and the like, you know. This conference provided a knowledge foundation on the fourth industrial revolution and its implication for career development in South Africa. Speakers at the conference were in agreement that the fourth industrial revolution is not the future, but a current reality. I should think, especially with the exposure to COVID-19, now we could see how important is a fourth industrial revolution. And we could not say a fourth industrial revolution will begin in 2021 because it is with us right now. The readiness of South Africa for the fourth industrial revolution was put under the spotlight. I should think we were so exposed under COVID-19, you know, where we had to do things multi-modal, you know, using various platforms. South Africa was rated 5 out of 10 on the readiness in a number of factors, including technology and innovation, by the World Economic Forum in 2017. This implies then, therefore, we really need to invest a lot of our resources around this particular area, especially post-COVID-19. If we look into since 2010, South Africa established a multi-channel technology platform to disseminate quality and relevant career information to all citizens through CATA project based at the Department of Higher Education and Training. These platforms include the cloud-based National Career Helpline integrated with the department as call center and Indlela, the National Career Advice Portal, and the Career Help website. During the lockdown, the technology behind the helpline telephone system enabled career advisors to continue attending to clients from home. In addition, the National Career Advice Portal has online career surveys, including a career self-assessment resource for career decision makers. So you'll agree with us that this is the area that we really need to invest hugely if we are going to make impact with regard to our career development services. In order to ensure that beneficiaries in poor socioeconomic conditions continue to access the existing technology platforms, the department engaged network providers on zero rating these platforms. And then to date, those engagement and agreements, were reached with the Telkom, Vodacom, MTN, MWeb, Rain and Internet Solutions. And then, of course, we were forced into these kind of arrangements, by COVID-19. So those are some of the opportunities that we need really to appreciate arising out of the arrival of COVID-19 into our shores. I've already alluded to this because these are the current zero-rated providers that we work with them in our existing technology platforms. Well, challenges, my colleague has already alluded into a number of these challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has engendered disruption and necessitated discourses on how we provide career services in post-school sector. It disrupted our traditional approaches to the provision of career services. The pandemic brought to a halt the provision of career services via conduct career exhibitions, face-to-face information sessions, and face-to-face career counseling, exactly what Dr. Mboya was alluding to. Students who exclusively rely on conduct career exhibitions and information sessions that are ordinarily take place at schools, libraries, and community centers have to receive career guidance. Uninformed career decisions might result in a possible increase in dropout rates, congestion, and low enrollment in certain career fields. The greatest threat to our success in rendering career services during the life.
It's better if we respond there. Will they show?
Yeah, they show.
Yep.
We can read the response.
And then which ones are more complex?
The tuition method. Are there any plans to do?
Apologies, but I just request that Dr. Mboya mute her.
Sure.
Mr. Mbawa, can I request that you unmute your audio? We don't seem to be able to hear you.
You can't hear me now?
There we go, we can hear you. Thank you very much. Apologies for the interruption, sir. You may continue.
Thanks very much. We're saying we need to invest in online delivery modes. Sometimes you are being thrown in the deep end of the sea and you begin to start swimming if you never swim. So this is what is happening, with us as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. Provision of career information can be made easily accessible on Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp. Especially, we know the generation of today is very much on Facebook, on Twitter, WhatsApp, and other platforms, which are quite very important for our communication. Invest in the development of career information applications. That's the area that we are saying we need to really invest a lot of money and our partnerships, going forward. Traditional modes of providing career services such as exhibitions and information sessions can be digitized. The pandemic has shown us that this is possible, as some institutions of higher learning are conducting their open days and exhibitions online. A hybrid should be sought. Such a model could incorporate both the traditional provision of career services and an internet-based approach to ensure inclusivity. If we opt for one and leave the other, we might exclude some of our young people. So that is why then, therefore, we are using these multimodal approaches. As I conclude, Program Director, as access to post-school sector is increasingly migrating to online, access to career services should gradually undergo digitization to encourage young people who have mobile phones that are connected to the internet to access seamless career services. It is acknowledged that data costs are still high and that connectivity in certain parts of the country is still a challenge, especially if you look into rural areas. Private and public partnerships are quite very critical in ensuring that this challenge is addressed. I should think my colleague was also alluding regarding the importance of partnership, especially with both the private and public. Well, as I conclude, Program Director, the first part of the webinar lays a foundation. The next webinar is on 27 October 2020, where a representative from Estonia will share how they responded to career services needs during the pandemic. The last session, of course, is going to be on the 27 October 2020, where the issues of digital divide will be discussed. Mr. Masholoku, the DDG at the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, will be one of the speakers. Once again, Program Director, distinguished guests and colleagues, thanks very much with this honor and opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mvalo, for your great talk. Can I request that you stay with your video on, Mr. Mvalo, and then if I can request all the other panelists and speakers to put their videos on, you can keep your audio muted because we are entering into what I think is the exciting part of the webinar, which is the interaction with the audience. We've been getting lots of questions and comments that I will then field to our panelists, and then we will get to engage on some of these topics. So we've had a questions and comments moderator who's been fielding some of these questions, and they're going to put the questions up for us to be able to engage the speakers. Is Dr. Maboya still with us? If you are, Doctor, could you please put your video on, but you can leave your audio off for now. Okay. While we wait for her to do that, we will start and get directly into our Q&A session. We've got a question here from Leseja Mohodi that says, are there any plans to deal with the inequalities that COVID-19 reintroduced into our school systems, and how soon will that be? I think that is more a question in the basic education department. So I don't know if Dr. Maboya would like to take on that question. You can put your mic on, ma'am. Dr. Maboya, you're still muted. Could you please put your audio on before you respond?
Annotation progressive.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Yeah, can you please repeat the question?
So the question that was up on the screen is from, so there's a different question now here that has been put up. They need to wait for the technical team to put our question up. But if I can remember clearly, it said, are there any plans to deal with the inequalities that COVID-19 has reintroduced into our school systems, and how soon is that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thanks for the question. We currently do have what we call a multi-year recovery plan, which really seeks to make sure that we close, whatever gaps that were exposed by the pandemic itself. Issues such as, in terms of the curriculum, we were able to pick up a lot of inequalities in our schools, whereby there were schools that were able to thrive even during the difficult times. So it means that you really have to have plans in place to really build capacity for the SMTs to be resilient and also to be able to exercise their professional judgment when needs be. In terms of things like your sanitation and water, I know that my colleagues who are in the technical unit, they are working very hard also to deal with these gaps that were identified. Teacher development programs are also, in place to make sure that we really plug all the gaps that we identified. For instance, the issue of remote teaching. Not all teachers were quite conversant with that. The issue of, being able to curate materials for learners and many other areas. Even the issue of just reorganizing the curriculum, because going forward, there will be a lot of disruptions because the COVID is still with us. COVID-19 is still with us. So you would expect at school level, your SMTs and teachers to be able to really be sort of autonomous in terms of reorganizing the curriculum to fit into the available time. So I'm saying that these are some of the things that will be featuring in our 3-year recovery plan. The reducing the class sizes, which actually benefited learning, is one of the things that we are also looking at going forward. And you might be aware of the fact that our CEM has already taken a resolution that says the social distancing is going to be reduced from 1.5 meters to 1 meter. So that in itself means now we'll have more learners going to school regularly. And so in short, of course, a 3-year plan has been put in place to try to address some of these inequalities that emerged during the COVID-19 period.
Thank you
Chair.
very much, Dr. Maboya. Really appreciate that response. And I think those plans are truly exceptional plans. And I do believe that with great implementation, we will be able to bridge that gap in that time. I think it's very important that we get everyone and all the stakeholders who are involved to come together. We are going to put up another question from our question bank. And the question will be as follows. It is directed to, it comes from Google Zulu, and it says, in terms of skills and demand, are there opportunities/platforms which enable professionals with critical to participate? I think it's critical skills it was meant to be, with critical skills to participate in higher education institutions to transfer their knowledge and skills. Example, engineers that want to teach in TVET colleges. Any thoughts about how this can effectively be enabled at scale? I don't know if maybe Mr. Mvalo would be able to talk to this question over here.
Yes. I wanted program director. What I wanted to say is that obviously, especially in our TVET college sector, it is an area that we're investing a lot of our resources. Just yesterday, we were appearing before the portfolio committee whereby we were dealing with the issues of curriculum development. If you look into the areas, that we are, prioritizing in our TVET sector, amongst others, are your areas in engineering. And I'm happy to say as well, if you look into our universities, you can trace in all years when we report our statistics, you'll see that the science, engineering, and technology, normally we refer to it as set fields, we tend to have more graduates, in those areas. But then, of course, within the TVET sector, we're doing more and more. We just also introduced in 2019 what we refer to as centers of specialization, whereby we targeted the 13 trades that are required, for special projects in the country, especially your infrastructure-related problems, challenges. Sorry. What we have done then, we employed to date, it's about 59 facilitators across the country, and all of them, you'll see they are coming from areas of critical and those scarce skills areas, and then we're doing quite very well with that work, with assistance of these highly skilled facilitators, especially around these 13 trades, that we have identified as the department. And also the approach that we've done is a bit different as well, Program Director, because if you look into your Germanic countries, especially in Europe, you'll see they, before anyone goes into an institution, that person must first have, a contract with the employer. So with these centers of specializations, which are quite very critical, and also in areas of critical skills in the country, so we have adopted, that kind of a methodology of saying, let's work with the employers, because the employers, they know the best, and then let's identify even curriculum. We've worked, with the employers as well. So I implore, everyone, especially in those critical skills areas, to always visit our website to look whenever we do have these opportunities. We normally do advertise them in our website and also through our print media. Thanks very much, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mvalo. I do appreciate that feedback. Do you mind, if you're still there, just to help us if there's anyone who's watching who would love to engage with any of those platforms, just to help us with which print media in particular, if you might know, and what is the particular website that we can share with people that might be watching?
Well, thanks very much, Program Director. When we do with regard to print media, for example, it's your Sunday newspapers. Well, I don't want to promote them in this platform so that they can make more money, but in those Sunday newspapers, we do advertise all these opportunities. And it's always very important for colleagues to visit our own departmental website. It's www.dagt.gov.za. You'll see the number. Even if you go in anyway into our career development website, you are going to be taken through to all these opportunities that are also available, in the entire post-school education and training sector.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mvalo. We do appreciate that, and I think that information will be very useful to a lot of people out there. The next question is for Dr. Maboya. It's from Diputa Fotania. I hope I said your name correctly. And it says, the president announced that 300,000 opportunities for young people will be created to be engaged as education and school assistants at schools throughout the country. Are there any plans to include the provision of career guidance as part of the work that these young people will be offering? Dr. Maboya, I don't know if you're there. Could you please put your video on and maybe you can talk to this particular question? It seems Dr. Maboya might still be having some technical issues. What I'll do is
I am in, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, the inclusion of teacher assistants who will also be looking into issues of career development. I think it is already in the terms of reference. So definitely we will also be, providing the necessary support to schools in that regard out of this pool of teacher assistants that we are going to employ. Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the question.
Thank you very much. Maybe if I can bring a follow-up question, and I'll put it to the entire panel and to see if anyone would like to pick it up, but is to really see how are we going to try and link together, especially when we've got these 300,000 posts that are going out there and these great initiatives that are being done by the CDS with Keta platforms and a whole bunch of those. How do we plan to really upskill and uplift those teams to be able to engage with all the platforms and get the learners connected as well? I don't know if anyone would love to tackle that one.
Yeah, let me tackle it, Ernest, Mr. Moderator. Career Development Services has a number of initiatives aimed at increasing capacity of what the people we call career development practitioners. Career development practitioners would be people such as your teachers, your librarians, your youth workers, student support services, staff at TVET colleges. So together with partners such as the South African Career Development Association, there are a number of initiatives that are currently being implemented to increase the capacity and professionalization, of the career development services practice. So this includes the development of a qualification specifically intended to ensure that people such as those teachers, librarians, are trained to provide professional quality services. And so there is a pilot currently underway, undertaken, by the CPUT, Cape Peninsula University of Technology, where we are taking, your student support services staff at TVET colleges, at community colleges, together with some at our, in our offices, to get professional training. So that plus a number of other initiatives are taking place to ensure that we have quality provision of career development services as a whole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mokeki. I think that does give us great reassurance that these young people who will be deployed are going to be very well equipped to really assist our youth in that space. There's another question now from Likile Sibohodi. I hope I said that correctly. When we are talking about jobs for the future, more especially the technical skills, I think we need more technical high schools. And what is the department's plan on the technical high schools? I think maybe Dr. Mabuya, this one might be coming back to you again. Are you still with us? We'll give Dr. Mabuya a few seconds, else we will go on to the next question. What I will do in the meantime, I can read just some comments that have been coming through as we've been busy. Thank you for the presentation and highlighting those factors. That's coming from Ste Matlalela. We've got Raisebe Mpela saying, addressing challenges for infrastructure, especially rural areas. Conducive classrooms, water, sanitation, security must be addressed. Wow. Making schools safe for all. Dr. Mabuya, are you with us?
Yes, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I can hand over to you to address the question about the technical high schools.
Yeah, Chairperson, thank you once more for the question. There are plans, of course, to expand the technical high schools. In the State of the Nation address about 2 years ago, I think the president did make that pronouncement to say that we will be expanding the number of technical high schools. And currently with the three-stream model that we are implementing, there are really very positive prospects that we will be able to expand those technical high schools. But what we are also looking at is to really strengthen partnerships so that we can begin to work with the CETAs in particular, and to make sure that we really make this a reality. So there are plans in place indeed to increase the number of technical high schools. But what I also want to emphasize is that we are also expanding in terms of what you call focus schools. Because within the three-stream model, you do have one of the streams is the vocational stream. And the vocational stream would then also, include other areas such as your agriculture, such as your arts. So we want to really increase such schools so that we can be able to increase the pool of learners who do offer, your vocationally oriented programs. So yeah, I think that in short responds to the question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maboya. We appreciate that response, and I think it is definitely great that the Department of Basic Education does have those plans to really help upskill our youth in that particular space. We have another question now from Joyce Kuno that reads as follows: what is the department doing to manage and increase a pool of educators who are qualified in the MSET subjects, and in order to address the much needed careers in the science fields? I don't know if anyone would like to take on this particular question, else I will then direct it myself.
Chairperson?
Yes, Dr. Maboya.
Yeah, from our side as basic education,
Apologies.
what we are doing.
Can you
hear me?
We can hear you. We just cannot see you. Could you just put your video on, please? Thank you very much.
Am I visible now?
Yeah.
Yeah, from our side as the Department of Basic Education, we do, as you would know, have what we call the Funza Lushaka bursary scheme. So we have prioritized, students who would want to pursue math, science, and technology, fields in teaching. So that's how we are trying to increase the pool of such teachers. So other than that, I think maybe DHET can come in terms of how they also try to promote or to increase the number of our MST teachers.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maboya. Can I maybe even ask Mr. Mvalo to maybe respond to the same point? Mr. Mvalo, are you there with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, if you don't mind putting the video on, sir, just so we can see you. Thank you very much.
Can you see me now?
Yes.
What I wanted to say, program director and colleagues, we're doing more of our work, especially with regard to career development services, in encouraging, especially your young people, to venture into your STEM fields. It's your science, maths, technology, and engineering in the main, because we are only going to be able to assist, with having more teachers, in these scarce and critical skills areas. If we are having more uptake in these areas, I indicated earlier on that, if you look into your science, engineering, and technology, we tend, especially in our universities, to have more graduates coming from that particular area, So in our career development services, this is what we are advocating, especially for your first years, those who are getting into universities, that they must venture into this particular area. And then obviously, because if we do not have teachers, including, by the way, lecturers, we are not going to be able, to deal with all your social ills, that are identified by the National Development Plan, your unemployment, your poverty, your inequality, because your STEM-related subjects are quite very critical. And it's a societal challenge. So it means then, therefore, all of us, we need to encourage, because if you are having, cohorts, of grade 12s, who, when they go to universities and go to colleges and decide to make choice, in other fields, which are not in so demand, especially if we look into growing our economy, because we need more of them into the areas of your science, engineering, and technology. So it's a big challenge that we are undertaking as the department, as well as, of course, with our partners in the post-school education and training system. Thanks very much, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mvalo. I do have another question for you from Votelwandana. And the question reads as follows: agriculture has been identified as one of the key sectors for job creation. Why were critical areas only identified in construction? Mr. Mvalo, I invite you to maybe talk to this question from your perspective.
Can you come again?
So the question says that agriculture has been identified as one of the key sectors for job creation. Why were critical areas only identified in construction?
No, I will tell you this thing. If you look into the newly, published, your restructuring and recovery plan, economic restructuring and recovery plan, you see it's covering a wide number of areas. Whether you look into your mining value chain, you look into your agro processing, you look into infrastructure. I know infrastructure is this big area. We know that anyway, if you are investing in infrastructure, you are going to be able to grow the economy. You are also going to be able, to bring in, those young people, especially those who do not have your grade 12s or those who do not have your matric. As I mentioned earlier on, we are having a challenge in this country, of high need rates. That you have young people, about 8 million from 15 to 30 to 35, 15 to 34, who are not in employment, education, and or training. And you'll see also, as the department, we currently busy with the important lists. I must also mention skills lists. The first list is looking into priority occupations. Government has identified about 17 priority economic sectors, that we need to invest in it, and that we need as well to bring more skills into those areas. The department, we are currently busy finalizing the list of those priority occupations to address those number of areas, those economic areas, about 17 of them. And then also another one is the list that is dealing with is a critical skills list. And normally this is within the remit of the Department of Home Affairs, because that is arising out of the Immigration Act. And we're busy with that, assisting or working with the Department of Home Affairs, developing that list, which is going to be ready as well before the end of this year. That list, because it's always very important, especially when we convey these messages, is meant for those skills that we require today, we do not have in the country. So it happens sometimes that, as we're having all these programs as government, there might be skills that we do not have them immediately. Those skills might be, let's say, in your pipeline. And then, of course, we cannot, as government, say, no, we are not going to continue with these projects because we need those skills, first before we get into those projects. Another one is a list that we refer to as occupations in high demand. We normally have that list released each and every 2-year period. The last one we issued was in 2018. If you go through, I know when we started, we were quite very ambitious because we were saying these are the 100 occupations that are required by the country. And obviously, a program director must mention, when the department is developing all these lists, it is working with the various partners. It is working with the experts in the industry, is working with the society, is working with your network constituencies, your organized business, your organized labor, and your community constituencies. So I don't think is there any other area of the economy that is critical to grow this economy that government is not prioritizing. I should think program director, you might have seen as well some interesting indicators. If you look into the quota labor force survey that was recently released, and we know, of course, obviously, it's a COVID-19 pandemic kind of figures. The only sector, which has grown, out of, I should think, about 10 of those sectors of the economy, the only sector that has grown is agriculture during this pandemic, during this COVID-19 pandemic. So it's quite very interesting. We have got important sectors of the economy, whether you speak of manufacturing, you speak of your mining, you speak of construction, all those sectors, they contracted, during this period. But then obviously, I know some of them even, pre-COVID-19, some of the sectors were in contraction. So we had what we call is a crisis before crisis. So hence then, therefore, if you look into the plan that is presented by government, it seeks then to cover into all those areas of the economy, especially those are going to create employment. And employment in this instance, we are not saying employment for those people who are in your highly skilled end, because we have to deal with the question of young people. If you look into, there is those who have no matric. I should think unemployed, it's about 1.6 million. And those who are unemployed, others with less matric, that is 2.3 million. Graduates, as was stated here, who are unemployed is 415,000. So those are the areas, if we are really going to change things going forward in terms of the economic recovery plan, recovery and the restructuring plan, if we are going to make impact, our approach has to be targeted. That is why also, if we look into our career services in the main, especially when we're having your face-to-face kind of interaction, we tended to focus like in rural areas, whereby we had those big exhibitions in rural areas. It's unfortunate, because of COVID-19, in each and every July, we normally have your Mandela month, your Mandela Day, your Mandela Week, your Mandela month, but we could not do. But then we are saying now we are in a new normal and we have to do things a bit different. So in conclusion, Chair, Program Director, I want to say, that we are concerned with all areas of the economy and not only one particular area, but then obviously you agree with me, especially those areas that are going to create employment. Thanks very much, Program Director.
Thank you very much for your detailed answer there, Mr. Mvalo. We really do appreciate that level of detail. The next question I've got is from David Kasaho, who's now putting a question through to the department. He says he's from the Department of Transport, and his question is directed to the DHET. What are the plans and initiatives in response to CDS delivery services? Are there any plans to host a major online career expo whereby all stakeholders and government departments will have an opportunity to participate? I think maybe Mr. Mukeki could be in a good place to answer this one.
Yes, thank you. That's an important question, and in fact, COVID, has challenged us to think about the provision of services in different ways, and fortunately, career development services, together with a number of our partners, had already started moving towards online provision of services. Colleagues will remember that we have a very strong element of self-help services that are online based, through our career help website, through the National Career Advice Portal, which addresses, I've posted on the chat, and people can have a look at those and visit us. The colleague, I think it's David Khasago, from the Department of Transport. Thanks for that question. I think it is an important question. Together with a number of colleagues from a number of SETAs, we are currently working on a plan to host a major exhibition, which is going to be online. And so we will communicate the details to colleagues as soon as those plans have been finalized and confirmed. But there is a plan underway to host something online soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mukeki. We've got another one here from W.A. Mbovu, which says many school teachers, learners, and parents do not have enough technical skills which will support online teaching that the Department of Basic Education is currently introducing as a means to ensure that learning is not disrupted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. What measures are put into place by the Department of Basic Education to ensure that teacher, learner, and parents are capacitated with training opportunities to acquire the much needed technological skills which will facilitate the advancement of learning? I don't know if Dr. Maboya is still here with us, but I'll like to put this question to her.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Maboya.
Chair, I did mention in my earlier response that within our recovery plan, one of the pillars will be the pillar of teacher development and capacity building. But we have also included, the empowerment or capacitation of parents, precisely because of, what has been raised right now. So we also working closely with our
So it seems we might have lost Dr. Maboya. Let's give it a second or two to see if we can get her back. But I think, she really has talked to the point, and I think it's so important just to sort of highlight the fact that involving parents in this conversation is critical, really, because our learners are spending less and less time in schools because of the fact that classrooms are crowded and social distancing. So I think capacitating parents becomes very important, that it can continue when they're at home, because that is really where they spend the most of their time. So I think that really does help us a lot. And I think looking at the time, doesn't seem like Dr. Maboya is coming back just yet. So I'll take this opportunity to sort of wrap up our Q&A session. Please remember, there's portals and channels that you guys can use to go and find out more information about what the various departments and projects are up to. We're going to move now to our next session, and our next session is going to be for our respondent. So for the session, I'd love to introduce Ms. G. Tiroyabone, who's the Assistant Director in Advising, Access and Success Center for Teaching and Learning at the University of the Free State. Ms. Tiroyabone, can I ask you to unmute your mic, and then we can request all the other panelists just to switch their videos off and mute their mics. Ms. Tiroyabone, over to you.
Thank you so much, Moderator Ernest. And once again, colleagues, good morning from my side. I firstly want to thank and take the opportunity to thank Career Development Services for such an engagement. I think it's a very worthy engagement for us to be having, especially in the times that we find ourselves in. And before I actually move ahead, I also need to acknowledge the presentations we've been privileged to listen to this morning. opening us into the sectors of education, both DBE and the PSET, really talking about what the impact has been of the COVID pandemic into their work, and more predominantly in career development within their sectors. Colleagues, I cannot emphasize the importance of reflection. Reflection actually puts us in a position where the Deputy Minister spoke to, where we are able to think critically and pause for a moment, and create an opportunity for us to explore and exploit for critical construction for the future. And I think, as we've heard this morning, career development is actually the facilitator of education in preparation for the labor market. And I also want to lean on a definition by Niles and Co. in 2005, where they defined career development as that lifelong psychological and behavioral process that shapes one's professional career over time. And I cannot emphasize how important this notion of overtime is. And we've heard, stemming from DBE, transitioning into the PSET, this is a critical facilitator of shaping one's profession. But I think I would want to be of the opinion that we're actually on the right path. We have not deviated much. The pandemic has actually propelled us now more than ever to be in an opportune space to be exploiting what we've been privy to. We've heard what Mr. Mvalo spoke to earlier on about the needs, and I think the pandemic has also widened this margin of needs. And I think it's very important for us to take a moment and think about old traditional principles and how we can bring those traditional principles back into our spaces. An example of a traditional principle is the traditional practice of distance learning. This has worked for centuries, and if we use those principles embedded in distance learning, that could help us leverage and facilitate career development for people like our needs sitting in rural areas. That could help facilitate that. Within the higher education institutions, we've seen the adoption of various learning and teaching strategies, remote, low-tech, facilitating where we find ourselves in. We've seen KETA play a pivotal role in facilitating the conversations in the higher education institutions around career development, career services, and academic planning. We cannot separate the importance of academic advising and career advising in shaping the future. So it's really important in instilling those behaviors continuously, and it's all not just left up to chance or just face-to-face interactions. There are various platforms, and we've heard Mr. Mvalo and Dr. Mabua speaking earlier on around the technologies that we can leverage, the social medias, the websites. There were questions around the rurals without data and access. If we adopt principles of distance learning, we can adapt those principles to facilitate and almost overcome the challenges we face of data and device accessibilities. The literacies are also critical in helping us facilitate this, because we make the assumption that when we put something on a website, students or learners can navigate it because they can navigate a cell phone. We've since seen with the pandemic that it's not so easy for students to work off a learning management system, which is very simple because they just need to download slides and engage in assessments. But we also need to think about embedding those literacies throughout their experience. We've heard also the trimming of the syllabus from DBE that has impacted this. How can we use a multimodal approach to help facilitate these things, ensure that learning continues, but also supporting the learners? This could be in an asynchronous fashion and not necessarily synchronous, because we find ourselves in changing times. And if we go back to the definition by Miles' colleagues of career development, we really need to disaggregate the components of career development. We need to really look at how career counseling looks, how career advising looks, and more importantly, how career services looks as a transitioner into the labor market. But if we view this, according to what Now says, as a process and not an event, we will really be committed to embedding the psychological and behavioral components that will intentionally embed the significance of this process into both DBE and the PSET. Colleagues, there was a question presented earlier around asking DHET around facilitating conversations. We've seen that SAGIA, the South African Graduate Association, really host a very successful virtual career fair in this pandemic. Is SAGIA a lever that DHET can lean towards based on their experiences to open up the sector? We've been speaking about these silos of excellence. It's time for us to really tap into those collaborations and partnerships, especially in places where things have existed. The DHET has actually funded a collaborative project that includes 7 institutions of higher learning through the UCDP to establish the first academic advising association in South Africa. And that was since launched 2 months ago, ELETSA. And is that possibly another lever we could lean towards for collaboration and partnership, because they have the skills, the scholarly and the practice of facilitating career advice. And we've got the South African career practitioners, that we can leverage on. How can all of these come together? We've got the SETAs in our space. We've got KETA. We've got Inlela. We've got all of these. But the challenge, colleagues, is how do we bring them all back together so that we have a brand that shapes career development for the future? As I mentioned, various approaches have been illuminated by the COVID pandemic. We need to reflect on these approaches and see how we can adopt and adapt these approaches to speak to how we silhouette career development services at our institutions. I really want to share quickly from the University of the Free State how we've embedded within our learning and teaching strategy the foci on flexibility that enables resilience and adaptability. And, institutions have caught onto this fever of graduate attributes. Is a possible graduate attribute we need to look at embedding into career development services a graduate attribute of entrepreneurial mindset? This is an attribute that could potentially help us shape from as early as DBE the learners and the students for a future that is ever changing. This is an attribute that solidifies not only the skills, but also taps into the attitudes and the behaviors that shape one personally, academically, and professionally. So, I really would like to hear the thoughts of colleagues of, an attribute of entrepreneurial mindset. We've seen private companies tapping into their graduate programs the notion of entrepreneurial mindset. Is this potentially another lever that could help us shape career development post-COVID-19? And just in my concluding remarks, I just also want to share that a study by Grit Lab in July of 2020, which was during the pandemic, showed that 86% of the respondents to their survey indicated that remote working is possibly the future. And the question we are confronted by is, are we shaping the learners and the students for such a remote multimodal labor market? Colleagues, we cannot lose sight of where the pandemic has propelled us to. There was earlier on comments around how 2 years ago, we were talking about having ranked 5 out of 10 in terms of our readiness for the fourth industrial revolution. But I firmly believe the pandemic has really propelled us into a new light that provides us with opportunities. There's notions and conversations about the blended approach, the high flex approach, the synchronous, the asynchronous. We need to tap into these, colleagues, into our already deeply entrenched services of career development like KETA, so that we can facilitate this and we don't lose the opportunity to integrate and enhance the practice through the technologies, but also not losing the essence of the learning that takes place. And in concluding, colleagues, it is now more than ever opportune for us to really stand together and partner with each other in tapping into the space that helps us explore and exploit. We are confronted by constraints of data and device availability, but could adopting the low-tech distance principles really help us ensure that we at least trigger and tap into that space that will ensure that we are shaping career development, the learners and the students for a future. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tiroyabone. We really do appreciate your response there. I think it was very insightful how you brought everything back together and some great responses from you. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through maybe some comments that have been given to us and recommendations by our participants and our guests. So I'll start with one from David Mudiba, who says, adding to Mr. Mbalo's response, the TVET sector has primary agriculture for NCV level 2 to 4 and framing management in report 191 N4 to N6. And then he mentioned, I think, a couple of courses, soil science, animal production, plant production, agri-economics, among the areas covered. I think that is in response to talking about why agriculture hasn't been pushed in that space. Another great one here by Mthokozisi Gumede says, Dr. Maboya, the critical skills that you're referring to must include actuarial science. The actuarial profession has a huge shortage of Black qualified professionals. The South African Actuaries Development Program, the SAADP, is trying to change this, but needs the DHET support. And they've given a website there, www.saadp.co.za. Thank you for that one. We have another comment from Stea Mahalela, which says, our undergrads need to be well equipped to face challenges and adapt. In these situations, critical thinking is a must. Critical thinking that helps solve problems that are facing and making opportunities for themselves, as opposed to just waiting for something to fall through. Another comment here from Ingrid van der Merwe says, could I suggest that there be a marketing campaign for the trades? I think this is so good. School leavers think that it is better to attend university and don't realize that these are great options. And I think, Ingrid, that is a very great point, because there is only so much space in the universities and the workspaces that come after that. But I think there's a much bigger labor force that people can do once they've done their trades. That's a great comment. Another comment here from Raiseb Mpela says, addressing challenges for infrastructure, especially rural areas, conducive classrooms, water, sanitation, security must be addressed, making schools safe for all. I think that also is very important with what's happening recently now in the media. Joyce Kuno then comes and says, the department minister alluded to the issue of connectivity due to infrastructure. This needs to be given serious attention. What is the plan? And then there's just timeline to get sorted, which is the question. And I think, from our side, COVID-19 and this pandemic has taught us quite a bit that we need to restructure and reframe, and maybe possibly we can look at how, with people working more and more from home, and we're trying to bring in more digital learning in the classroom, if we could start to maybe even reallocate physical building budgets into actual internet infrastructure to be able to connect people and parents from their homes. Judith Smith mentions that it is also highlighted how much we are out of touch with the people on the ground. And I think if you don't spend enough time there, you really do miss out on what is happening. I've got two final comments before I maybe give our panelists any final comments from their side. We've got Tembanani Mabasa, who says KETA radio programs can be used to reach communities as an added tool to bridge the digital divide, which I think is a phenomenal platform to be able to use. It's offered in, I think, 10 of the 11 official languages. So it's really accessible to anyone and everyone from the deepest of the rural parts. And then our last comment coming from Taryn from Fearing says, little did we know that we should be catapulted deeper into the fourth industrial revolution so soon and have adapted so quickly. And I think that really gives us a lovely summary of this kind of year. And I think, a parting comment from myself is to say, there was a radio program I was listening to a while back that was asking people, do they think this has been a good or a bad year? And I think a lot of people were saying this has been a very terrible year, obviously. But I personally think it's been such a phenomenal year because we have really been upskilled. And I think it isn't too late for people that, have done nothing about their upskilling at this point. I think we really need to then take this opportunity and really make sure we utilize it and gain the necessary skills to be able to take part in this fourth industrial revolution and not be left behind. What I will do now is maybe give an opportunity to our panelists to see if they've got any final recommendations from themselves before I hand over to Mr. Mukeki to summarize and close up the webinar for us. Are any of the panelists keen to do any final recommendations?
Ernest, I just want to conclude by saying, colleagues, we don't have to go back too far. We really have a lot that we can really just pivot to really just move career development services. So it may feel like there's a lot being said and some of these things are unattainable, but I must also acknowledge that a lot has been done previously that we can really just use as a stepping stone to support us into the future of career development services. So it's just pivoting our discourse, but nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guru. Mr. Mvalo, any last comments coming from you? Mr. Mvalo, your audio is muted. If you don't mind unmuting quickly for us. Mr. Mvalo, we still are unable to hear you. Could you unmute your mic? There we go. Thank you very much. It seems you've gone back to mute, sir. I don't know if there's a challenge from your side, but
it's on now, ne?
Now we can hear you. Perfect.
It's not on now. Oh yes.
Yes.
Program director, I must also take this opportunity to thank you for having presided quite very well, during these few hours, and also my panelists and participants, who participated and shared a lot of ideas, as we move forward, of course, post COVID-19 pandemic. I want also perhaps maybe to refer colleagues, there was a very good study that was done by Stats SA. It's a social impact survey. It's very interesting. Colleagues can just go to Stats SA and look into that study. It's telling us, for example, that during lockdown, 72.9% children were participating in a home-based schooling. So it tells us then, therefore, that going forward is the way that we need to invest. 67% among respondents whose children attended public schools. It's a good news. If you have got 67%, of learners who are participating during COVID-19, that's quite very huge from the public schools. And then another interesting dimension, Chairperson, once again, this shows us, our gender divide. The study is telling us that 59% of respondents indicated that mothers were the primary supervisors who were guiding these learners, during the lockdown. And it's a call that is going all of us as men, that we must take full responsibility. Well, there is no way that you can have 59% of mothers who were the only ones who were assisting, learners during the COVID-19 pandemic. The fathers, it was 9.2%, who were assisting during COVID-19 pandemic lockdown. So we do not know as to fathers what they were really doing, during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially your level 4, your level 5, and level 3. With regards to technology, we are told that 75.9 respondents indicated that they had smartphones that they could use for home learning. Those are the good news. If you have got 75.9, that's almost 76%. 36.1 had access to tablets, whilst 61.2 could use laptops to support home learning. 53.3% of respondents indicated that learners could access and use television, radio, 27.9%. That's also interesting because you see those were using the radio and those were using the TV. 53.3% were using the TV and 27.9% were using the radio. And lastly, the issue of data is going to be important and imperative, especially if we are going to succeed, in our online services, whether it's career development services or any other services. So we're told here 40% of respondent households did not have enough data to complete their online learning. And then you could see that deficiency is quite very serious. If 40% of the respondents, could not be able to complete their online work due to data. 2/3 of respondent households with cellular connections reported inadequate access to data. 2/3, that's quite very huge, compared to 15.4% with satellite access, 14.1% with DSL access, and only 4.4% with fiber. So this tells us then, therefore, as we are saying, all of us, and I maybe also my panelists also agree that we need to invest, especially with regard to our digital divide. And also government is focusing into our digital economy. There will be the presentation, Chairperson, as a program director, as I earlier referred to, that is going to be done by someone from the responsible department. Thanks very much once again, Chairperson and Program Director, colleagues, and everybody.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mvalo, for your final comments. We really do appreciate that contribution of yours. We have come now to the end of what we call our first webinar in this three-part series. Who I'm going to hand over now is going to be Mr. Mukeki. Mr. Mukeki is the director of the CDS at the DHET. He will be giving us a summary of our webinar as well as giving us the vote of thanks. Mr. Mukeki, over to you.
Thank you, Ernest. And thank you, colleagues, all of you for joining us. Maybe before I do my vote of thanks, there was a question that was asked by M. Dagada earlier. It might have been missed. And the question was, how is DHET working with others to ensure that we resolve the problem of working in silos? This question will help me segue into what I want to talk about. The department published a policy, a national policy for integrated career development, system for South Africa in 2017. And part of what this policy intends to do is to chart a vision for a provision of an integrated career services for South Africa. And this helps to bring together different partners, from the basic education to Department of Employment and Labor, correctional services. I saw comments from colleagues from correctional services, Department of Transport, Agriculture, all government departments, including the private sector, and non-profit organizations that are involved. Whoever is a stakeholder, a partner that is involved in the provision of career development services, this particular policy speaks to. And one of the structures that it speaks to setting up is what we call the Interdepartmental Career Development Committee, which is a committee that helps to drive career development services in this country. And the Department of Public Service and Administration, Social Development, Department of Education, of Employment and Labor, Basic Education, all form part of that particular committee. And then at the top is what we call the National Career Development Forum, which is a much bigger forum comprising government departments, SETAs, and a number of other entities, and we come together, all of us, to learn from each other and to chart a way forward for career development service provision, as a country. And this is important, to highlight, because as the Deputy Minister Manamela also mentioned, we need to deal with the issue of working in silos as well. So I wanted to address that. Let me just go back and highlight, one or two, things, that I thought were quite key from the different speakers, this morning. Mr. Butima Namela, the Deputy Minister, for higher education, science and technology, I mentioned a number of things. One of them was how COVID-19 has really disrupted and changed how we do things in a big way, especially issues around digitization of services. And he highlighted the problem exposed by COVID-19 of the digital divide. And he highlighted especially the point that even as we advance to invest in IT infrastructure development, we must keep in mind the inclusion agenda, that we do not move far ahead without making sure that we move together. And I thought that was an important point to make. As we come up with innovative solutions, as we think about how to respond to COVID, the issue of inclusion and has to be kept, has to be borne in mind. And that is why, even from our point of view, the department has been leading efforts to ensure that a lot of our platforms are zero rated. And so discussions took place, have taken place, as Mr. Mbalo was also saying earlier, with our telecommunications, companies in the country to zero rate access. And so you'll find that universities, website of universities, of TVET colleges, of career development services, of basic education, and a number of others have been zero rated, so that a lot more of our people can access, some of these services without having to pay for data. And so the issue of investment then in online platforms and solutions, can be pursued with vigor, as long as we make sure that we include everybody in that particular process. Mr. Mbalo also mentioned in his talk, one of the things that I picked up was the importance of career development services. He mentioned that career development services is a nexus for education, work, and lifelong learning. And I thought that was really important, colleagues. And I wanted to highlight that it's not just education and work, it's education, work, and lifelong learning. And that's an important thrust. Dr. Maboya, spoke about, some of the disruptions, the challenges, and how the Department of Basic Education has really responded, to some of those challenges, homeschooling, self-directed learning, multimodal, technologies that are being put in place, especially the issue of around stakeholder collaboration and making sure that we are leveraging, on each other's, skills, technologies and abilities, in order to deliver, provision of education, for learners as a whole. And we also had Ms. Guguti Tiroyabone give us a response and a reflection, in fact, that I thought was quite key, because she mentioned quite a number of things that are quite important, issues around exploring and exploiting the environment that we are in, looking critically at where we are and saying what opportunities are there, and then saying who's out there and who's doing what, and how do we leverage on what is being done. And she mentioned a number of partners that we could look at leveraging on. And so let me just also thank our speakers that came, the first being the voice or the video message from the Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology, Mr. Mutimana Mela, for, we thank him for his illuminating, welcome message that really, charged us and charted the way for the rest of this meeting. I also want to thank Mr. ZNC Mvalo, DDG at the Department of Higher Education and Training, DDG for Skills, who was speaking on, on behalf of the Director General for his input and participation at this webinar. I want to thank Dr. Mamiki Maboya, who is the Deputy Director General for Curriculum Policy Support and Monitoring at the Department of Basic Education, for her input and her, and just being able to outline for us what the Department of Basic Education's approach, has been and, is, and what the vision is going forward in terms of dealing with, the challenges that we are all facing. I also want to thank Ms. Guguti Tiroyabone, Assistant Director in Advising Support at the University of the Free State, for for her response, and I just want to remind you who've joined us, that like Ernest was saying, this is the first of the 3 webinars that we are going to have. The first one was on as we had implications of COVID-19 pandemic on delivering career services in the schooling and the PSET sector. And the next one we're going to have is going to be on the 27th of October, starting at 9:45. And we're going to be looking at a case study of Estonia, and how that country, Estonia, has really responded, to quickly to how online services can be put up, can be improved, and so on. And so, if you could join us, for that, webinar next week, Tuesday, the 27th at 9:45. And then that is also going to be followed by another one that is going to be focusing on the digital divide, realities of public education and training and youth of South Africa. And so a lot of the questions that you raised in your comments today, spoke a lot about the digital divide. And there is a particular webinar that will look at these realities. And we have a number of really good speakers lined up to help us think through some of these issues as they will be presented. So we invite you to join us, for that, and also to remind you that we will then also have the Career Development Services Annual Stakeholder Conference on the 19th and 20th of November. I want to conclude by thanking all of you for joining us, and for the comments and that you have been posting on the chat, and thank all of our speakers for responding to these, and also want to just say that we apologize for the earlier technical challenges that we experienced. One of the laptops crashed, and it caused all kinds of problems, and we are confident that the second webinar and the subsequent ones will not have those kinds of technical challenges. And also just to thank our technical team that is working behind the scenes to bring this, to bring us these webinars, and the CDS staff and departmental staff as a whole that have been involved in this. And so this is the end of the webinar. We will talk again. Thank you for joining us. Talk again. See you again next week. Thank you.